So I have a drop stitch on my Sentro circular knitting machine right here. And this one's a little bit different because it's dropping from the bottom up. And it doesn't matter how many times I crank out my rows, it's going to continue to drop. And that's because I did not cast on correctly on my machine. I either went over 2 needles or under 2 needles instead of the over and under. So here's how I can fix this instead of having to remove the entire project from my machine and frog it and redo. Here's how you can fix it. We're going to go around, and when we get to the left side of the yarn holder, we want to make sure there's not any yarn tucked under those needles. So I'm going to move my yarn around the 2 needles 1 time. And this is just going to make sure that there's no more yarn tucked into the machine. So now when we crank around the second time and we get to those 2 needles, you see how that loop just pops off the pegs and there's no more yarn. So now once it's popped off of the 2 pegs like this, we are going to fix both of these rows with the drop stitches. And so we just need a crochet hook, and I'm going to undo this, and we are going to do our knit stitches up with our crochet hooks for these 2 rows. So first you just kind of have to untangle it a little bit to make sure every single ladder or those horizontal bars of the yarn are all in order. Okay, I have all my bars in order, and so I took out a couple extra ones. So we see that we have this loop right here. And we have to loop these around these last 4 or 5 bars to the end. So we have the stitches on either side of the needles done completely. So we're going to loop them around, and we just take 1 horizontal bar at a time. And now we're going to do the next one, go over and under, and now we have a new loop. And then we're going to go over and under one more time to have our end loop. So now we just have 1 loop left. And now we're going to do our 2 rows of our knit stitches. So I'm going to take my crochet hook, and we're going to do 1 row at a time. I'm going to put it underneath the horizontal bars of my yarn, and I grab onto the loop and I pull the loop up and over the bar. Now that bar is the new loop on my crochet hook, and then we continue doing the same thing. You pull the bar over the loop, and then the loop over the bar, and that bar is now your new loop on your crochet hook. And this is how you make the same knit stitch going all the way up. So I'll zoom in here a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. But we're just making the same knit stitch or stockinette stitch that the machine makes by hand to fix our drop stitch. Now I'm going to fast forward this and meet you back up at the top. Now that we're back up at the top, we just have a couple to do. When we get to the top, it does get a little bit tight, so you just take your time to make sure you can get that loop over the horizontal bar and leave the last loop on your crochet hook, and then make sure the fabric's tucked under the peg. And then we're going to put that little loop onto the 2 small pegs here. So now our 1 row is done. Since I had 2 needles that I had a drop stitch on, now we need to do the other side. And we're repeating the same steps. We're going to put our crochet hook under our project, and we get to the last loop that's at the bottom. Put that on our crochet hook, and now we're going to do the same thing. We pull a bar up over the loop, and then we take the loop and pull it over the bar. The bar is now our new loop on the crochet hook to make our knit stitches, and we'll go all the way back up to the top. So I'll fast forward and meet you back up at the top. Now while I'm fast forwarding here, I'm just going to talk a minute about drop stitches. When you drop a stitch, there can be many reasons why the machine is dropping stitches. This is just one way when you cast on, not going over and under each needle. I also have a couple other videos about drop stitches I've linked in the video description below. So check out those videos as well. But now that we're back up to the top, we have our last 2 bars, and I got a loom pick here because it gets really tight. And so sometimes the loop pick can help get that last loop over the bar, and then putting it back onto the machine. If you don't have a loom pick, another good option is to use a paper clip that you undo so you have the little end to use as your loom pick. And so you can take your time with that last one, just because it's really tight on the machine. Make sure the fabric is down underneath the two big pegs. That's also a big help. If it's on top, sometimes then it's way too tight and you can't get it back onto the machine. So I have the fabric tucked under the two big pegs on either side of this needle, and then we're going to put that loop back onto the two small pegs. And then I'm just going to use my loom pick here to help make sure that that loop is fully seated down over those two small pegs there. Okay, now that we fixed the drop stitches, now we need to start cranking out your rows. But you want to take your loom pick or your finger or something to hold down that loop to make sure it doesn't pop off the machine. See, just like my other one did here. Or else you have to fix the drop stitch again. So make sure it's seated down, and as you crank forward, I go pretty slowly to make sure the loop stays seated down those two pegs, and then all the needles are catching the yarn and then pulling that yarn back down. And once that's going around, now the drop stitches are fixed and you can continue to crank out your rows. So I hope you found this video helpful. This is just a drop stitch that doesn't happen as frequently to me as some other ones, but I thought it'd be a really good video in case it started happening to you, how you can fix them. The other option, if you can't get it quite fixed, would be to remove the entire project from your machine, frog it, and then recast on. Fortunately, this is a drop stitch you can find. Usually you spot it right away when you haven't done your cast on right. Lastly, again, check out my video description below. I have links to some other videos about really common ways you can get drop stitches and how to fix them as well. So thank you everybody so much for watching. Hit that like and follow button if you haven't done so already, and happy crafting.